Oi, oi, alright, how's it going? I'm Grant, this is DoodleReview, bringing you non-stop music content some of the time. Things have been a bit hectic lately, so I'm struggling to get out as much content as I have been, but I'm keen to still get these review roundup videos out fairly regularly because I'm still listening to a bunch of music. We've got loads of new stuff to get to. You can see just here we've got some Lauren Bousfield, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, Post Malone, Blake Mills and Military Gun. And from now on I'm going to take you through my week's listening rotation in order of bad, better and best. Absolutely sucks to be in that first category, but someone's got to be, so let's get into it. I feel kind of the same way about Post Malone as I do Lewis Capaldi. He seems like an absolute legend of a bloke, but I just don't get along with his music. I will say I probably have a softer spot in my heart for Posty because he seems to have great taste in music. I saw him recently hanging with the band Military Gun on their Instagram, waxing lyrical about Queens of the Stone Age on a podcast, and let's not forget that surprisingly rad Nirvana's cover set he did back in lockdown. I'm not taking the annoying position of like, oh, he likes good music, so why doesn't he make it? Because I do like pop music and I don't necessarily see one genre as above any other. But when listening to Post Malone, I'm confronted with what must happen to most people as they get up into their 30s and beyond. The realization that this music just, it's not made for me. I definitely recognize the skill and talent on display. In the case of Post, he clearly has a knack for a hooky vocal melody, and I really like his acute vocal vibrato, which I think is a cool example of how auto-tune has actually influenced the way a new generation of artists organically sing. The production and arrangement from Andrew Watt, who's fast becoming one of my favourite modern pop producers, is also really slick, crisp, and blends a good mix of digital and organic instrumentation. But it's in the songwriting where it just doesn't really hold up for me. Lyrically, it's raw, reflective, and honest, but it's also just super cliche. And this is the age thing coming into play. While this album will relate lyrically, I'm sure, for a lot of younger listeners who would probably die for Austin, as someone who is classically angst-ridden in my teens and early 20s, I've heard every variation of these themes at this point. And that certainly doesn't write off angsty music in general, but when it's executed like this on top of the broadest possible pop mum on the school run songwriting and next to no interesting wordplay or lyricism, it just doesn't cut through for me. That's not to say I absolutely hate the album. I've listened to it a bunch. It's inoffensive enough, and there's even a couple of ones I would probably actually listen back to outside of a review. Something Real, Buyer Beware, and Laugh It Off, for instance, I think are pretty cool, and even Chemical is pretty irresistible, even though it's by the numbers as hell. I'll continue to hold an interest in whatever Post puts out, but it's still not for me right now, and I'd give this record a very generous 4 out of 10. Trent Reznor recently appeared on Rick Rubin's interview podcast, and amidst a wide-ranging, career-spanning conversation came the admission that he doesn't really want to tour anymore and doesn't feel particularly inspired to make a new Nine Inch Nails album anytime soon. Fortunately, in his side gig, or now main gig, as a film composer alongside fellow Nail Atticus Ross, the pair have been making and taking on movie projects that allow them a bit of scope beyond just ominous tones of dread or stark piano pieces. Case in point, the 3-volume soundtrack to the Watchmen TV series from a couple of years back, and now this most unlikely collection, the score to the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. Both of which treat Nine Inch Nails fans like me to Reznor's darker, heavier tendencies that have been sorely missed since the last real song-based Nails album in 2018. Aside from a little dose of heavy, this collection of score from the latest reboot for the Heroes in a Half Shell actually offers a surprisingly wide selection of the Reznor-Ross palette for what you would imagine to be a fairly straight-up, pulpy comic book animation. In fact, Something to Love and Better Than Mark Ruffalo managed to deliver some shockingly powerful piano pieces, the latter not far off the icy isolation of their Dragon Tattoo score. There are also a lot of short interludes and soundscapes that rarely make their way onto the album versions of Reznor-Ross scores, but here are mixed really well into the overall recording, allowing it to be enjoyed as a standalone. While the variety is certainly welcome, it's the upbeat, heavier, harder, beat-centric pieces that are the highlight of the record. Tracks like Megamind, Groove Type Shit and Murder the Shreks that no doubt back up the action set pieces of the film. Among the lively tracks, fun and enjoyable as they are to fans of the composer's work, quite a few of them do sound generic by Reznor standards, whether that's Grand Theft Ice Cream Truck that could have been a heavier cut from the first Ghost set, or I Just Met You and You Almost Killed Me, which could have come from, well, any Nine Inch Nails album from the last 30 years. There are also some surprisingly sappy numbers, which no doubt are a result of working in service to, a movie, but are pretty derivative. Happy Ever After tunes, the aptly named Happy Ending, for instance. Those critiques aside, though, there are some really cool moments here, like She's Gonna Milk Us, that brings all of the tones that are housed in their own little tracks on this album under one roof, kind of becoming the most expansive in the set. As well as something quite new for this duo, the use of acoustic, almost jazz-like drums that provide cuts like Murder the Shreks and The Worst That Could Happen with a kind of chaotic energy we usually get from distortion on a Reznor joint, but here is brought by the rhythmic performance. Overall, this is one of the lighter and more accessible scores of Reznor and Ross. I don't see myself coming back to it in the way I do their best work, but there's some fun to be had, and I'd probably give it a 5 out of 10. It makes me somewhat optimistic about humanity that in the 2020s a spate of artists have emerged that seem determined to drag all genres together into some sort of harmonious kaleidoscope. Industrial, yep, we'll have some of that. Pop, yep, neoclassical, trip hop, breakcore, get it all in there. What tends to emerge, though, typical of humanity, is less a harmonious kaleidoscope and more of a nightmarish hellscape. Although, in my eyes, that isn't always a bad thing. Lauren Bousfield is a musician and sound designer based in Oakland, California. She started her career with the equally abstract project Nero's Day at Disneyland and now produces music solo under her own name. While Bousfield's music is more rooted in electronic and club-based music than an artist like Fire Tools, for instance, I'd put them in a similar category due to their no-holds-barred kitchen sink approach to composition, which in both cases results in groundbreaking genre fusions and soundscapes that can be as awe-inspiring as they are challenging. Where on Fire Tools' latest I felt completely lost in the source, on Bousfield's Salesforce there are shorter, more succinct pieces and just more musical moments my conventional brain can get a foothold on. Certainly Hazer feels like being swept up in a tornado, ripping through a festival with multiple conflicting bands playing at the same time, but just as you feel about to tap out, it grounds you with a melody you can cling to like a lifeline in its back half. Headstone Prices on Credit and Debtor's Prison Click Here, Disney Needs to See This follow with some straight up breakcore, and this leads us into neoclassical program piano of Hail sound. While I'm still unsure of what mood or period of my life I would genuinely feel the desire to put this record on, perhaps if I take a sudden meth-addled path it would be suitable. I don't know, but between the moments of intense lunacy, this can be an interesting and sometimes even compelling listen. It's a 6 out of 10 for me. One of the best shows I went to last year, and definitely a contender for one of the best in this whole little life of mine in general, was a post-hardcore triple bill of High-Vis, Military Gun and Fiddlehead. All bands offered a slightly different flavour of the genre, interpolating the aggressive yet melodic style with all of their respective influences. And of those bands, Military Gun were for sure a highlight of the night. At the time, they were touring All Roads Lead to the Gun, a record that acted as a bit of a mini retrospective, compiling singles and their major EP releases up to that point, and in turn, presenting almost a complete blueprint of the sound the group were pursuing. Life Under the Gun, the group's first full-length album, has emerged as the final product of that public planning and prototyping to really strong results. Where the previous releases offered a patchwork of styles, this record puts forward a band with a defined, consistent sound and solid identity. Every song here hits hard and is given a clarity with lean production that rarely offers more than a drum, one guitar, bass and vocal combination. That economy of production is also reflected in the arrangements, with no track wasting any time in getting to an often anthemic chorus that begs to be sung along with. Despite the clear definition of the group's sonic guardrails, there is still plenty of dynamism in the track list, with songs like See You Around offering a mellow mellotron moment of relative calm, and the lullaby guitars of My Friends Are Having a Hard Time providing a nice foundation to an emotive song that still manages to hit the heights of the harder tunes. Vocalist Ian Shelton's bellowy style rarely relents over the record's 12 tracks, and while this is kind of a trademark of the genre, it can be fatiguing. See You Around offers a little variety in Shelton's delivery, and it would be great to see this develop more in the group's future. Overall though, this is a solid sort of debut from a band I'm excited to see more of, both in person and on record in the future. I would give it a 7 out of 10. I first became aware of Blake Mills from his appearance on the excellent, sadly long past YouTube series Guitar Moves. Hosted by Matt Sweeney, the frontman of alt rock hero Chavez and a journeyman session guitarist himself, he would interview dozens of guitarists, from mainstream icons like Keith Richards to lesser known but equally fascinating artists like Mills. The series was a goldmine for guitar players or enthusiasts of guitar music because it dispensed with the entry-level questions and got right to the heart of each player's style, and with them often demonstrating how they actually accomplish their unique sound, giving background on it. Mills caught my eye and ear because, if I remember correctly, he showed a really unique ability to create an almost tremolo-like vibrato sound on guitar organically via his fretting of the strings rather than relying on effects. Off the back of this, I then checked out his album Hi Ho, which immediately floored me with its opening song If I'm Unworthy, once again demonstrating an ability to give voicing to the guitar like I'd never heard, creating that tremolo sounding rhythm, this time by finger picking while providing a lead line over the top at the same time. The dynamism he can create in just his attack of the instrument is exceptional, and that talent's clearly well recognised, because while I know Mills now for his solo work, it's his session credits that have made him a sought after player, working with everyone from Ed Sheeran to Jack Johnson in the mainstream to improvisational saxophonist Sam Gendel in the underground. He even wrote, performed and produced the music of the Daisy Jones and Six series for Amazon recently. As a solo artist, Jelly Road is Mills' fifth record following 2020's Mutable set, and where the songs of that record were rooted in piano and synthesizer, this one feels very much based in organic, analog and raw instrumentation. Guitar is a prominent instrument throughout, but what fascinates me about Jelly Road are the fragile, almost broken sounds and textures that support and colour the pieces. There is a harmonica or harmonium on Wendy Melvoin that fluctuates slightly in and out of tune, possibly through being double tracked, that just works against the finger-picked acoustic guitar. That's something I'm sure you can read on paper and crinkle your nose at. Could sound so perfect and weirdly soothing is credit to Blake Mills' unbelievable mastery of sound. This is just one of 12 songs, each providing some embellishment or production choice over the top of an already perfect melody. It's another fantastic record from a fascinating and truly exceptional musician. Definitely check it out. For me, this is a 9 out of 10. That's it for this week. Have you listened to any of these albums? What did you think? Are you swinging for me? Are you agreeing with me? Let me know in the comments below. Feel free to shout me another album to check out. I might be up for giving it a look. Cheers.